Brilliant. Okay, so what we're going to cover today is how to write a scientific paper and get it published. And apologies to anybody who has seen parts of this before. Okay. Your first step, if you want to get a paper published, is you've got to choose the right journal. Now, this might seem obvious, and to many of you, you may be thinking, well, we all work in a similar area, wouldn't it be the same journal? But you need to think quite carefully here. Think about who your audience is. Are you trying to share information about the underpinning chemistry and catalytic reactions? Are you trying to share information about the carbon reductions associated with a particular bioenergy process? Is it about the potential utilization? And what you will see is that different journals have slightly different foci on this. So some of the ones that I've put down here are general renewable energy journals, but one of the ones, for example, Bioresource Technology, is quite close to my journal, Biomass and Bioenergy. I spoke at their annual conference last week, but there is a difference. Bioresource Technology focuses more on the engineering of the process and what you can do with the biomaterial. Biomass and Bioenergy is more focused, first of all, on energy, although we do also take material that looks at material outputs and chemicals. But we're more focused on the biomass part of it. What are the particular challenges associated with the fact that this feedstock is biomass? Bioresource Technology, more focused on the how can we implement this and get it out and get it scaled up. Renewable and Sustainable Energy Reviews, I had a paper accepted there just a week ago. They look more at review synthesis type papers, very high impact journal. But a little bit trickier to put some of your perhaps PhD type work into. So who is your audience? Who are you trying to reach? Look at your references when you've written your literature review for your PhD or whatever project you're doing. Who are you citing and where do they publish? Are you citing the same journal all the time? If you had to read a journal, no one does nowadays, but if you did, which one would it be? If you look at the journal websites and you scroll down, can you see that, you know, a good maybe 10% of what they publish is relevant to you? The reason this is important is that journals are reliant on reviewers. And when you submit something to me, I'll show you the process whereby we send it out for review. And when I do that, I'm reliant on the people who read my journal and who write in my journal. And so if your topic is very narrowly focused, say, on functional materials, then it'll be really hard for me to find a reviewer who understands that. So you need to think about where your paper will get the best hearing from reviewers. Where will you have reviewers who really understand what you're saying and also appreciate the significance of that in your sector? Another area where we sometimes struggle here, but it's got a lot better in recent years, is as we morph into the social science side of things. So agriculture and social sciences, but certainly in biomass and bioenergy, we now have a much better coverage of those aspects than we used to. Okay. Sometimes there might be a particular special issue coming up on a topic that's relevant. I will flag that we are about to launch a special issue on biomass to energy with carbon capture and storage in my journal next month. So if that's particularly relevant, it's good to get it into a special issue. I can tell you that you can look at the impact factors of different journals, see how many people cite them. And what you will find is that when they put a special issue out, it will outstrip all of its regular citations. So if I look at the impact by the different publications in my journal, what I will see is that the impact factor and number of citations for the things that are in special editions can be up to 10 times higher than what we get for a regular edition. So it's always a good idea to consider a special edition if it's relevant. Ask your colleagues, ask the people who've been around for a long time what they publish in. Do not do not ever, 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 can't emphasize this enough, submit to more than one journal at a time. It will come back to bite you. Reviewers will find, particularly in specialist areas, that they've been asked to review the same paper twice by two different people. You will end up with both editors rejecting your paper and nowhere to go, because we have a special list that flags up people who have previously misbehaved when they have submitted things to the journals. Okay. So this is the team on my own journal, but let's get on. Read the guide for authors and the aims and scope. A lot of things can surprise you in terms of scope. So look at the homepage of the publisher, look at that scope of the journal and just check that what you are proposing is firmly within their scope. There are odd things in there. In my journal, we do not accept work on the combustion of biofuels in engines. We do not accept work on isolation of different bacterial strains on the biological sciences. It's because we don't have the expertise to be able to support it, and we feel that those are better placed to other journals. So look at the journal homepage, make sure it's in scope. If you're in doubt, drop a line to the editor and just check. It's better to do that than to prepare something for a journal that is going to just be rejected as out of scope. Poorly prepared manuscripts. There are two big issues here. One is the figures and formatting and tables. Every journal has a slight variation on how they want you to submit these, but by and large, they all want you to submit them as a separate file that will be uploaded. You have got to make sure the quality of those is up to scratch. And this is particularly a challenge for those of you who may be carrying across experimental results that are in analog format as an output. So please make sure that you get a really high resolution on those and submit them in. If we have to struggle to decipher it, the reviewers are probably going to get in a bad mood with your paper and mark it down, or we may reject it before it goes out. The other thing that is a constant issue is English language for those for whom English is a second language. Different journals have different policies. In my journal, I will always look at the science first. So I will send it out to review, even if the language is poor. You will then get a warning on the revision that says that the language must be corrected and we will only allow you one chance to do that. And if you do not correct the language, then it will be rejected. I am currently in deep argument with one author who ignored that, submitted his revision with all of the technical issues addressed and totally ignored the fact that there were grammatical errors everywhere, and we rejected his paper and he's not very happy. But we can't have revisions hanging around forever. We've got to draw a line under things. So it is important that you address English language, if English is your second language, early on. It's worth maybe putting a cover note in on the first submission, saying that you've done your best with it and that on the revision, if they think it's worth having, then you will get a colleague who's a native speaker to have a look at it more closely, just to avoid maybe doing too much upfront on it. So different journals have different requirements. The biggest variation is probably around the length. A typical journal article might be 8,000 words. 6,000 to 8,000 is a good benchmark, but they vary. Science and Nature publications are often only 4,000 words, and very, very occasionally you do see articles that reach 10 to 12,000. Those tend to be exceptional. So you've got to get the length about right, but check the individual journal. And yeah, you need to look at any specific requirements that they have. If you go to the wrong journal, you will waste your time and everyone else's, because the submission will languish. It will come to me, I'll look at it and I'll say, well, yeah, technically it's in scope, and I'll send it out to reviewers. But if it's not our core area, my reviewers will not get excited about it and they won't give you a quick turnaround. So it really makes sense to look at what is current in the journal that you are submitting to. Okay, use the cover letter. A lot of people ask me what they should put in a cover letter. The answer is really anything you want, but here are a few tips. If you have presented this material before, be that PhD thesis, conference, or whatever, it will show up on my plagiarism check as soon as I get your paper. So it's really worthwhile explaining that. It is not a problem to have pre-published as a thesis. It is not a problem to have pre-published in conference proceedings, provided that what you're now submitting is different. The normal difference between conference and journal is you will have more background material, more literature review, more understanding the nature of the gap, and your conclusions will be of quite a different nature. You will have more discussion around benchmarking your results with others, and you will have more discussion of the fundamental scientific principles that are underpinning things. You'll have the hypotheses and a commentary on the extent to which that has been met. Those tend to not occur in conference papers. Conference papers are about sharing with everyone what you've just found out, okay? So if need be, you might have to justify what you've changed since your conference paper or your thesis or whatever other publication you have used, your blog post. But from the journal's perspective, they are looking for unique material. Now, we can make that unique through the copyright process, which actually effectively boils down to what does the photograph of your paper look like. But no journal wants to publish material that is already available in other forms on the internet. You might want to explain why it's taken you so long to pull these results around. You should explain what role the different authors played. It is increasingly important, particularly with REF, happy to talk about that if anyone wants, that you justify the role that the different authors play in any publication and connection to other publications. So you might want to explain that this is for feedstock B, whereas last year's submission with almost the same title was for feedstock A, or you might want to explain how it builds on things. Reviewers and editors will often reject if things look like they're only incremental compared to what you have done previously. So just be careful about that. Okay, so you've got as far as actually trying to submit something for publication and what to expect when you try to progress things through. The author submits the article to the journal and we have an editor who screens the paper. The person who does this from my journal, many of you may know, it's Chun-Fai Wu at Queen's University Belfast. He's the managing editor and he will screen the paper at the outset for fit to scope and will make any observations or concerns he has for the other editors. We then have a review process. The editor assesses the review. We go through revisions. I'll just go through this step by step. So yes, so some journals like Biomass and Bioenergy have a managing editor. What we're looking at the outset is it relevant to the journal? Is it novel? Is it good quality? Has it been well presented? And the standards vary a little bit, but those are the main things that I'm looking for at that point in time. And those are the main things that will result in you getting a straight rejection rather than it going to review. So on average, 30% do not pass the screening stage and are rejected before review. In Biomass and Bioenergy, it's above 50%. I think it has in some years been as high as 70%. So you've got to be really careful. I find that usually it is unusual to find good science hidden behind badly written and badly formatted papers. Generally, if the writing and the formatting is bad, the science is not that exciting. Reviewers are providing the technical depth. They're talking about comments on the design of the experiment, the presentation of the data, the results and discussion. They will give feedback to you that you will see. They may also give comments to the editor that you cannot see. And in those, they're more likely to comment on the novelty and the significance. They're likely to say that, well, that's fine, but doesn't really add much. Only a very marginal feedstock, incremental. You know, that's the sort of thing. Is this really worth a full journal paper? They will give me back a recommendation that, again, you can't see. that it would be accept. They will actually choose between major revision and minor revision. They may recommend reject, or they may recommend reject and resubmit. So I see those, and I then give you a result from that, which is either that it gets rejected or that I send it back to you for revision. In my journal, I cannot remember an occasion when I've ever accepted a paper without some form of revision. There's always something you can improve upon. And I think it's really important that we get a positive relationship between the author and the reviewer. Reviewers are there to make sure that what goes out is good quality. If I send you back a paper to revise, I will only do that if I think it's good enough to publish. So once you have it back, you know that it has potential. And at that point, your job, my job, and the reviewer's job is to improve the paper as much as we can before it's published. So that is what we will be focusing on at that point. So you have to enter into things in that positive mindset. You have to look at the reviewer's comments and realize that these are actually the opinion of an expert who is trying to make your paper better. You shouldn't be approaching this as an argument or a defensive escapade. Okay, so the results, as I've said previously, you may get straight desk reject, accept, never in my journal. It will always go for revision and it'll be minor or major, but you often won't be told which it is. You can guess from the extent of the comments. The distinction here for me is that if it's a minor revision, I will not send it back to reviewers when you submit your revision. If it's a major revision, then there's something really fundamental going on and I will need to check their opinion before I ultimately accept or reject, or you may get a rejection. Okay, so when you get those sets of revisions back, don't respond straight away. Take time to think about it. Think from the reviewer's perspective, and I can't emphasize enough that you positively take on board the comments. Look at it from their perspective and think about what can you improve. Don't assume the reviewer doesn't understand. If they don't understand, it's because you haven't explained it well enough. Because I would not send something back about not having understood or that is incorrect without first having checked it myself. So it means that I feel it needs clarification as well. You either have to make the change requested for each point or you challenge it. Challenging it is sometimes appropriate. If you feel that the reviewer has mistaken something, or if you feel that there is more information that you have not yet disclosed that you can provide to support that, it may be worth challenging the comments. But I would say that 80% of the comments that I send out are best responded to by modifying your submission to address the reviewer's concern. You will get you then get to write a response to the reviewer, and I suggest at this point that you respond to every single item point by point. Makes the editor's life easier and your pathway to acceptance quicker. So responding to those comments, I make a table. I put all the comments down the left-hand side. I put the next one, what changes they actually want, and then on the right-hand side, I write my response. I start with the easy ones, the units, the you didn't include this reference, and then I deal with the major ones. They're the big things. I will always draft a response letter. That's where I can explain to the editor what he may not have understood or why I disagree with certain things that a particular reviewer is saying. The golden rules: be polite, be thorough, and answer with evidence. It really will not help your cause if you get angry at the reviewers and challenge them. They're there for a reason. I choose them because they have a good track record in your area, and it really is not helpful if people come back and say, well, that's rubbish. Okay, editors are human beings. Good luck with your submissions and write well. But really, I'm here to answer any questions that you might have. So that was the overview. Anyone got any questions or any experiences of journal publication where they've been frustrated or not understood or whatever?
Hello, hi.
Hello.
Hi, I'm Fidat from University of Leeds. And I was going to say, if you do get rejected by a paper, I know in the beginning you said you shouldn't submit twice to like different papers. Can you then try another
Yeah.
journal?
What you can't have is it under consideration by two different journals at the same time. Once you have a rejection, you are then free to resubmit. And if you want, you can resubmit it in exactly the same format. I'll give you a tip, which is change your covering letter. It really irritates me to have people send submissions in with a covering letter that tells me they want it to be submitted to my esteemed journal Fuel, and then to tell me this. And I'm thinking, right, yeah, well, I know where this one went before. So yeah, but please just pay a bit of attention to it. But there is a hierarchy, and we are actually putting in place a system at the moment that will do an automatic transfer. So where we have very highly rated journals, certainly within the Elsevier family, where things get rejected, but we think they might be good enough for another journal, and we actually are internally cascading them down. That system has just been brought in about a month ago. Oh, someone asked about review papers. Do you know what? I've got a whole separate presentation on review papers that I'm going to have time to go through, Joe. Oh, let me just see if I can pull out some gems from my review presentation. Okay. I'm going to share a few slides again with you guys, if that's okay, just to bring out some points on the review stuff. Graphical Abstracts, Scott Banks, I love them. It can make the difference between accept and reject if you've got a really cool one. Absolutely love it. No, it's not compulsory at all. And if you do boring stuff like I do on policy and things, it's really hard to dream one up. But if you've got cool graphics and you can show fractionation and compounds and stuff and molecules, please do them, because they are really helpful afterwards when it comes to disseminating and sharing your paper. Let me just share some content, and I'll just pick a few slides from my how to write a review paper presentation. Okay. These are all available online on the Elsevier Research Academy. So I would generally recommend for a review paper that you approach the editor first with a proposal. And that's what I've got in here. The summary of the scientific content, why you're going to write something that's going to make a difference, what the key topics are. And you're really justifying here the need for a review. I want to go back up to one of the really early slides on this. Forgive me, I'm going to have to, yeah, the point of a review paper. It isn't just to look at everything that's there. It's about adding value. They organize, evaluate, and distill information. They provide a bridge between fields. So often you might write, so if you're working on biomass and biochemicals, you might decide that you need to write a review paper for people who do energy policy, or for people who do materials and polymers, that sort of thing. That can be really helpful. Review papers that are agenda setting can be really good. So if you've done some small pieces of work that indicate potential for a particular research area, you might want to do a review paper on that. I'm just going to try and find the other slide that I want here. I'm going to try and get the synthesis. So why write a review? Not good to write a review because you want to learn. Not good to consider it just another item on your CV. It is reasonable to write a review to demonstrate your expertise and consolidate your position. It will help you in terms of your citations. It won't help you for ref because review papers are not eligible. And it gives you a bit of time and space to think about your field and where it's going. So I think that the main reason, though, is that, you go through and you gather lots and lots of information when you're doing literature reviews for stuff. You think, hey, the thing that I've noted is that across all of those papers, none of them does this. That across all of those papers, I think I'm seeing a trend that this type of feedstock is better suited to this, or that these sort of molecules tend to emerge. That's the sort of thing that is the foundation of a good review paper. I'm going to just see if I can find any other words of wisdom for you here on review papers. It's a proposal. Yeah, this bit is the key bit. A review is not a collection of results. A review is something that you have to have some added value that you will learn by comparison and critique of the work that is not apparent by reading each of the papers separately on their own. So it's about the synthesis of things being pulled together. And you could just then go through and give real ideas for future experiments, what the future landscape is and the path to transition. So I was involved with a review paper last year that I really recommend you have a look at if you're thinking of writing a review paper. It was done by Andrew Welfel up in Manchester with myself and some other people as co-authors on it. And what it did was it reviewed modelling. And it was published last March, and I think it's already got about 20 citations. It's been really highly cited, partly because it's a really, really good paper. It looked at over 1,000 different papers in its literature review, and partly because it's very topical in terms of current gaps in the modelling arena and what we need to say. Okay. Right, next one, Josephine. If I have a question, submit to a journal with no APC and the editor-in-chief directs me. That's a terrible thing to do, yes. I would not follow that editor-in-chief's recommendation, and I would not move to one with a higher APC. I think that's outrageous. Have you had that happen, Josephine? Josephine,
I
are you
believe
there?
Josephine left briefly. It says she has, no longer has access to the chat.
Okay. Anyone else got any questions? It does just raise a question there about impact factors, though. Don't be too swayed by impact factors. I have always been of the opinion that good science is good science, no matter where you publish it. And you can do a lot for yourself. And please talk to Katie and to Dan about this. You can do a lot to promote your work and to get your citations up above the average for a journal. I don't actually think impact factors of journals matter too much, and I wouldn't use it as a deciding factor in where I publish. I think it's important to have an editor and a reviewer who understand my topic area. I have never submitted anything to Nature or Science because I see too many papers there on biomass and bioenergy that either don't know what they're talking about, they're economic modelling masquerading as bioenergy, or they are trying to put forward a particular viewpoint that I don't feel is justified by the evidence. So they are two journals that I have never submitted to, and I can't imagine any circumstances under which I would, even though they've got really high impact factors. Renewable and Sustainable Energy Reviews has a really high impact factor, 12.1, and I'll happily submit there, but not to those others. I realise that is an unusual position. Not many people would say that. Open access and traditional, oh my goodness, how long have we got? Right. This is a very hot topic in the industry. So traditionally, the idea was that we would not pay to publish our work. We're scientists, we don't pay. We submit our knowledge and the journals incur the cost of administering the system, the cost of employing the people, the cost of promoting it, the cost of, having the reviewer system in place. So they incur all of those costs and they have to charge them to someone. The traditional model is that they charge that cost to the people who want to read the stuff. This is not unreasonable. The problem is that you then end up with a situation where only the people who can afford it can read it, and that is considered unreasonable. if we are trying to get more of our research into the public domain, and if it's publicly funded, it should go into the public domain. It's also unreasonable when we look at, for example, countries that are not as wealthy as the UK is, that they should have an equal access right to research outputs, and if they can't afford it, then they're not. So I think that, you know, this is where the problem has arisen. Somebody has to pay, and either you have to pay at the front where the person producing it pays, or you pay at the back end. Personal opinion, I don't have a problem with the, I actually don't have a problem either way. I think I'm often quoted as being more favouring the subscriber pays model. I actually am quite happy with either model, but I think we need to be careful about what happens to the balance of power as we shift. And one of the things that concerns me immensely about the author paying for an open access journal is the power then resides with the author. And that means, in just the same way that I'm sure you've all experienced, that once students had to pay tuition fees, suddenly the standards went up in terms of the hours that you could expect to see your supervisor, and there were, you know, standards set on contact time and all that. Wouldn't have happened if students hadn't had to pay. When you have to pay for something, you expect a standard of service. So when we have authors paying, the authors feel they have a right to get things through. And that bothers me immensely, because some stuff is just not good enough to publish. And as an editor, I want to have the right to turn things down. I want to have the right to take my time over decisions where they're difficult or tricky, and I want to get third and fourth opinions. And I want to make what goes out the door top quality, and that takes effort. So open access, yes, I can see the argument for it, but I think that if you go down the open access route where the author is paying, we need much greater safeguards in terms of the reviewing process. We have to become much more confident about the integrity of that relationship between author and editor, that it's not just I'm paying, therefore you will publish. And I have serious concerns about the robustness of the reviewing process in some newer, less well-established journals. I have seen stuff come through and get published where I just look at it and I think that is dreadful. I mean, it's so, I know there are different qualities of journals, and I know that some will publish things that others will not, but you know, there are fundamentals here around repeatability. You've got to give enough information to make your work repeatable. It has to be robust, it has to be rigorous, it has to be not plagiarizing, it has to be adding to existing knowledge. And I've seen too many examples of material published in some of the author page journals where the quality was just not what I would countenance. So I have personal bad experience, and therefore I feel a little bit averse to it. I believe it's possible to have a model where it would work, but I just think it will need more of a rebalancing of the roles of different people in the publishing system. Another question from Joe, the current prevailing situation to work and review paper. Sorry, I'm not quite sure I understand why it would be involving undergrads. But most journals will accept a mixture of review papers and research papers. As I said, talk to the editor. They won't want to put a topic out in a review paper if they don't think it's strategically important, and they won't want to make it a review topic if they've recently done another review paper on it. Some journals have a policy of commissioning review papers, and they won't accept unsolicited review papers. So I think the acceptance rate, I don't think varies that much. I think they probably get more desk rejects than other papers, because if I just think it's not worth a review, I'll just reject it without sending it out to anyone, or if I've done another one recently. But you know, if once we've got something that is good enough to come in the door, then it goes through the same process as others, and I send it out to reviewers. Yes, some of them may come back and say, I don't see what this is adding, but that's always the case. So I don't have statistics on the acceptance. Okay, so journals are in a competitive market. This is answering Onyi's question. Journals are in a competitive market, and as an editor, my journal will get judged. It will get judged on how often it's cited by other people. It will get judged on how many subscriptions it sells. It gets judged on a whole range of metrics. Therefore, it's my job to make sure that I have stuff in there that my community wants to read. That means that it's recent, it's exciting, it's novel, it's robust. People want to come to a particular journal because they know the quality of what's in there will be good. Are you saying less convincing science is accepted in some places? I'm saying that it could be of lower quality. So let me give you examples of the sort of things that I've rejected this month. I've rejected stuff where they've brought me sets of reactions and experiments that were carried out on a waste material that was collected from certain shops in a particular country in the world. That's not replicable. I can't get the robustness that will bring that up again, but I can appreciate that if you live in that country and if you are, you know, aware that, you know, the mango processing there only happens in a certain way, then it might be good enough to be relevant to you. So a journal with a more geographically specific focus may be appropriate. But every journal editor wants the best material they can get their hands on. That is the long and short of it. And therefore, I've only got a certain amount of space. I'm looking typically, so Biomass and Bioenergy, we put out roughly 12 editions a year, and I'm looking for about 15 papers for each edition. So that gives me my number of target number of papers per annum. I know that I have a certain number of special editions each year, and therefore I know what my target is in terms of how many papers I need to accept from what comes in the door. And I will pick the best ones, and I'll fill my quota with the best ones. And if it's not quite good enough because there weren't enough repetitions, the experiment wasn't done in triplicate, you didn't give me all the details, you didn't do a statistical analysis on the results, the feedstock isn't fully characterized, so I don't have its composition. Those are the sorts of reasons that are quality related that I will reject on. Santosh.
Yeah, I have a question on reputation versus impact factor of a journal. For early career researchers, one of the toughest job is to judge a journal, whether we need to take into consideration of reputation or impact factor. Would you comment on that?
Sure. Reputation is a difficult one. It's very subjective, very qualitative. It depends on what your field is. Despite that, people invent metrics, and there is a common metric around quartiles. So journals are commonly categorized as Q1, Q2, Q3, and Q4. I'll not bore you with all the details, but those basically take into account a basket of metrics associated with how much the journal gets quoted and cited. Some universities will advise their students that they should only publish in Q1 journals. Journals may drift in and out of those quartiles each year. They may be Q1 one year, Q2 the next, but it's generally fairly consistent. I think it is reasonable to say that impact factor is a good proxy for that Q rating. It is rare to see stuff that is considered Q1 journal that is not also high impact. However, you need to be careful. If you're working in a really specialist field, then you may not get many Q1 journals to choose from. But also, if you're working in a really specialist field, there are less people around who are going to want to cite your work, no matter how brilliant it is. So therefore, the journals that you work with may actually have naturally a lower impact factor just because of the topic. So one of the measures that helps to account for this is called the field-weighted citation impact. And that allows you to look at how good a particular, you can get FWCI for both individual papers and for journals, and it allows you to look at the journal and how good it is within its field. There's another metric that you can get on SciVal, and I can't quite remember the name of it, but basically it goes by topic group. So if you, let's say, are working on pyrolysis, then in pyrolysis, it will show you what the top 0.5% of journals that publish papers on pyrolysis are. So it means that you're avoiding the fact that, yeah, everybody knows if anyone in pyrolysis publishes in Nature, it's going to get cited. Let's focus on the journals that actually do pyrolysis. I can't quite remember the name of that metric, but what I recommend you do is if your institution gives you access to SciVal, I'll just type that in the chat, have a look on there. And within SciVal, you can actually look at journals as well as looking at individuals, papers and research groups. And when you go to the journals, you can get a set of journal metrics. So if you look there, that allows you to compare things. And one of the other really interesting things SciVal will give you is it gives you the spread of disciplines. It shows a big circle and it plots different colors for, you know, chemical engineering will be here and economics will be here. And it allows you therefore to see whether the journal you're aiming at actually does a lot of biology or not. And there can be pros and cons. If you're trying to show something that could be revolutionary, but isn't revolutionary in biology just for people in energy policy, then you might want to target a journal that doesn't have a strong correlation with your current subject field. But if you want to do it the other way around, and if you want to get your message out to everyone working on catalysts that this new one is the best thing since sliced bread, then you want to find something that is squarely within that sort of chemical catalytic reactions subcategory. So yeah, if you can get access to SciVal, I would highly recommend exploring SciVal. I've talked a lot. I'm going hoarse.
That's really a detailed answer. It's very useful. I do have another question. If there's no comments on you know, the prospective review and the literature review, would you recommend the early career research to consider writing prospective review?
What do you mean by prospective review? I'm not sure I understand.
In prospective reviews, mostly it's not like most in the literature review. Usually, thoroughly paper by paper, we review them and then we discuss the merits and demerits, and finally we conclude. But in prospective, we don't go paper by paper, but mostly like we have a discussion and direction. So would you like, I mean, do we need an experienced researcher to write a prospective review, or early career researchers can consider?
I think early career researchers can consider it. I think they're often the best people to gather the data, to pull together the insights. I think that the best review papers I've seen have been written by early career researchers working with very senior researchers. The senior researchers really can add an awful lot with relatively little time. They can read something and point things out to you and help you with the synthesis. They'll be aware of bits of the literature that occurred before you were born and don't therefore feature as easily in the electronic media. It's that sort of thing that they know who's working on what, even though it hasn't been, yet published. So I think the best combination of people for a review paper is an early career researcher or PhD student working with a head of group or department. I think that's a brilliant combination, and often gives stuff that's really insightful, and yet has the thoroughness and the depth that the early career academic can bring to it. I think writing these things as a pair, triple or group is always a good idea. I think particularly for review papers, they can get a bit staid if you just try and do a longitudinal study of everything you've ever read. Once you start talking to other people, you get different ideas on how to categorize things and think about things and different themes. And that's what gives a review paper its richness. And that's when you get those new ideas cropping up. One of the things I would recommend as well with review papers is get some cool diagrams in, you know, diagrams that show that you've got this crop of papers and this crop, and then you see more things happening in different areas, and try to work back to the correlation statistics. So look at, you know, how many papers that mentioned this also mentioned this. And what is happening, and how does that show the trend in, let's say, interdisciplinary collaboration in a particular area, that sort of thing.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's very useful.
Okay.
And also,
I am very happy anytime anybody wants with an editorial query to fire it over to me, and happy, you know, at any Supergen event that you see me at, if you've got a question about journals or a problem with a paper, please do just shout. It is our job as editors to help people out with these things.
I do have another question regarding, you know, after publication, for example, like what kind of, you know, support in the journals are giving, promoting an article after publishing. Would you comment on that?
Answer very little. No, I'm going to be fair. Sometimes they do. It depends on whether or not it manages to hit the radar of the right person internally in the journal. Don't wait for it to happen and don't risk it. Get your email signature, put the link to your journal paper below your email signature. Have you read my latest paper? Bump, put it there. Talk to people in your department, share it with all your colleagues, get it on your university website, promote it in Share. Talk to your friends about it, you know, put it on a Teams chat with the Share group. There's so much you can do yourself. Write a short summary with the key diagrams. So pick your diagrams out, plonk them in, and take your abstract and write a summary around it. Lots of people will cite your work without ever reading the full paper. They just need the really important bits. And if you can feed that to them, you spoon feed that to them, they'll read it, they'll enjoy it, they'll cite it, and they'll rate you because you've bothered to do it for them. Okay, talk about it at conferences. So don't just show your new stuff when you get asked to do talks and presentations. Show the stuff that you've just published. I'm forever accepting invited presentations and then not showing anybody anything new, just regurgitating stuff that we've written many times, and it works. It helps remind people what we know already, and it helps to set the pathway. I can see question from Ruang, resubmission after rejection. I think it's up to you. If I give a recommendation of reject and resubmit, which I sometimes do, it's because I can see value in what you're doing. But I know that if I send it out to reviewers in that format, they will get so focused on some aspects of it that they'll be really negative and we won't get anywhere with it. So often an editor will ask you to resubmit if they can see that it is of value, but that it isn't going to pass the hurdle in the current format. So if that's the case and you've been asked to resubmit, then I would recommend that you do send it back to the same journal. We don't give that message for nothing. If you haven't been asked to resubmit and it's just been rejected, difficult one. I think that in most cases, I would probably end up rejecting a paper no matter how much it had improved. I can't think of many examples, one or two in the last year maybe, where I rejected something and they improved it so much that I accepted the next time round. So I think that is a trickier one, and you might be better off at that point trying to focus on another journal. It's often worth reaching out to the editor and saying, oh, I was really surprised this was rejected. If I did this, would it be worth resubmitting to you, and just see what they say.
To build up on this, does the editorial team considers the conflict of interest when sending the for a review a paper? Not maybe directly involved or worked with them, the author of the papers, but also like the area of the research. sometimes we do see, like, when in a similar area, if they are working a similar problem they are working, so more often we get the negative comments than the paper deserve.
I think when that happens, it's worth in your response putting a comment in your covering letter to the editor and saying that you suspect that some of the reviewers' comments may be because, and give a very diplomatic description of what you've just suggested to me. Editors have the benefit of being able to see who they've asked to review papers, and I can see the characteristics of my reviewers. So when I look at a reviewer, I can tell if they've rejected the previous 19 out of 20 that they've been given, and therefore they're always a bit negative. And if you raise a concern, or I can see that they may have published in exactly the same area that you have, and therefore they may be trying to denegate your work to preserve something that they have going on themselves. Remember, you can always request that certain reviewers are not used if you have particularly sensitive material. But yeah, I think I would put that in the cover letter to the editor. I can see another question about an ESR who wants to become an editor. Oh, good. The short answer is talk to people who are editors. I've got a whole editorial team and we're often looking for new people. And earlier on this year, I was in that position. And what I've done is I have got Chong as my new managing editor. I do have an opening at the end of this year that I'm keeping an eye out for, but I could probably really do with someone in the US. So I think look at the people who are editors on journals, make friends with them at conferences. I do get a lot of messages from people saying, I'd love to be an editor on your journal, and I just don't have the capacity to reply or to keep some of those. But if you really want to be an editor, the best thing you can do is review lots, because when I'm looking for new editors, I generally need a particular subject. So I'll first of all start by looking at my reviewer database, and I'll look at the particular subject, and I will go down the list. And when I see those individuals who have, let's say, reviewed more than 20 papers for my journal, then that shows understanding, commitment, support, the sort of things that I'm looking for in an editor. So if I do go blind to find editors, and I have done on a few occasions, those are the sort of criteria that I weed out on. But I do have to admit that often the weeding out is by geography or by topic. It may be that this year I need to replace someone who is an expert on forestry, and therefore I need a forester. He happens to be in the US, so it'd be really helpful for me to get someone from at least the American continent, north or south, plus Canada, but that's not essential. But you always want to have a balance of your reviewers, of your editorial team. So at the moment, one of my editorial team is in the US, one is in China. I'm going to struggle here. One is obviously me in the UK and Chong in the UK. Then we've got one in Belgium, 2 in Italy. That's a bit of an anomaly. Doesn't often happen. So you generally want someone in the US, some in the US, some in Europe, some in Australasia, and some in Asia. That really helps.
Okay, right. So, hi everybody. I'm Dr. Katie Chong, and I work at Aston University with Patricia. So we both work at the Energy and Bioproducts Research Institute, also known as EBRI, for those of you that don't know. And I'm Director of Research Outputs as well. And my link to Supergen is that I help all of the early career researchers. So I help the Excellent Share Network, who are running this session today. So I'm going to talk to you about something a little bit different. So about the writing process itself and some of the things that I've learnt over through my career, and hopefully some of this stuff will be useful for you too. Right, so good writing starts with bad writing. We can never start writing straight away and it being perfect. We know we have to go through lots and lots of different drafts. So hopefully you'll pick up some useful stuff from today. So a little bit about me. So I've already introduced myself, that I'm a lecturer in chemical engineering, all that blah-de-blah stuff. I've been a lecturer for 5 years now. Before that, I was in industry for quite a long time. And in between that, I did my PhD as well. So I've been dipping in and out of industry and academia for quite a while. And I really, really don't like academic writing. But as an academic, you really can't escape it. So you've heard in the last talk from Patricia, all of the chats about metrics, impact factor, all of those kind of things. And I think I don't actually like them. So I don't like all of those metrics and impact factor and all of that thing. I think they add undue pressure and stress to a job that is already quite full of pressure and full of stress. We already know that you've got to write your PhD, you've got to get those proposals written, you're under pressure just to get papers out the door. So I think the important thing is is to focus on the impact of your work. So think about, okay, how is it making the world a better place? I think that is a much more healthy thing to focus on than getting that number, that really high impact factor, or that really all of those other metrics as well. I think they can be a little bit unhealthy sometimes. So understand them, but don't let them take over your life and career. So academic writing, yeah, you can't escape it. That picture on the right, it does look a lot like me, but it isn't me. But that is how academic writing makes me feel. I just look at it, I just think, oh, I've got to write. We all know we have to do it, whether it's for our PhD, whether it's for all those papers that our supervisors, our bosses, Patricia's my boss, that they want us to write. You just can't escape it. So how can we make it a little bit more bearable? And hopefully I'll give you some useful tips today. So I also wanted to say that it's very personal. So these are some of the things that have worked for me. It might not work for you. You might love writing. If you love writing, write it into the chat. In which case, why do you love it? How do you love it? And tell me more. How have you got to this position where you actually like academic writing? Yeah, no, we don't all love it. I'm keeping an eye on the chat as well. So please talk to me in the chat. It's nice to have a little bit of interaction. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of the things that work for me, introduce you to some helpful resources. I recommend that you try out some of the things that I teach you today and really find what works for you. So I discovered when I was doing my PhD that, yeah, I really don't like academic writing. And then when I came back as well, the pressure was on to get those journal papers out, to get your metrics up. And I really didn't like it. So what did I do? I started to research. I'm a chemical engineer, I'm a researcher, I'm a massive nerd. So when I want to learn how to do something, I researched. So I did exactly the same for writing, and it's something that I've not really stopped doing. So I've always got my eye out for new resources, new things that might help, new tips and tricks. Nathan, you're a weirdo. You love a bit of writing. I already know that Nathan's a bit of a weirdo, but now that's confirmed because he loves writing. So tell us why, Nathan. Why do you like writing? So this is one of the really useful books that I found. It's called The Productive Researcher. So it helps you in the whole of your career about how we're under a lot of pressure to be productive. And this book I found really useful. It's by a professor called Mark Reed, who runs a site called Fast Track to Impact. So look online at his website, on Twitter as well. He also puts out some useful resources, and I know he's producing a second book soon that's all about research impact. So I think that rather than the metrics that we're judged on, I think the impact of your work is much more important. So another one that I really liked was this book called Deep Work by Cal Newport. So he's written quite a few books about work. He's another academic, and in this one he introduced a concept of deep work to me, and that is something that really works for me, not just for my writing, but for just managing my time better. It just seemed to make sense. So this is one that I've really implemented. And this guy, Cal Newport, has a really good podcast as well that's worth a listen if you're interested in productivity and that kind of thing. Sometimes if I'm feeling a bit flat, I will listen to one of his talks or read some of his book just to get me going again, to get that motivation level back up. So Jose, you like writing because it helps you to learn more through reading your references. So yes, so that's a good way to look at it. So it helps you understand the background to your work a little bit more. There are loads and loads and loads of online resources and support. A lot of those you can find at publishers like Elsevier, which is the publisher that supports biomass and bioenergy. So they've got loads of resources there about how to write, how you should write abstracts, how you should write graphical abstracts, or lots and lots of useful stuff. So dig and find the things that work for you. One of the resources that has really worked for me is a guy called Hugh Kearns. So you can see his name down at the bottom of the slide here, and he has a company called I Think Well. He's written quite a few books, and they're all targeted at researchers. And the good thing about his books is that they're really easily digestible. So you can probably read the whole thing in less than an hour. But the tips and snippets that he puts into his books is really good, and some of those I'll be presenting today as well. I highly recommend that you attend any of his training sessions if you can get your university to pay for that. So we've been lucky at Aston that we've had Hugh come and talk to us and really motivate us to get writing. So loads and loads of online resources, loads of free stuff on Hugh's website as well to help you with your writing, like planners, audits as well, so you can keep track of your progress. So those are the ones that I found particularly useful, the top 3 ones really. So have you found any other resources that you think are particularly useful? So please post your links in the chat. I'm just going to have a look to see what's been said. You don't love writing, but love doing experiments. Yeah, Nathan, I really like scientific communication in general. I like more public scientific communication though, and like talking to my students and that kind of thing. I find putting it into the really dry academic context quite hard. Anya, academic writing is difficult. And yeah, when it comes back with all of those track changes, yeah, that is hard. That's another thing that you have to learn about as an academic is building up your resilience. So no one's got any other tips and tricks or useful links that they'd like to share with us? Please do add them to the chat if there's any particular things that have helped you to get writing. Okay, a phrase bank. Oh yes, I've seen that one. Yeah, the Manchester Phrase Bank, that is really useful. Loads and loads of really useful phrases and different ways of saying things, so that when you're stuck for a nice word to describe something, then that phrase bank is actually really useful. Thanks, Sarah. Right, so academic writing is hard. I think pretty much whether you like it or not, I think we all agree that it is really hard. But why is it so difficult? So what is it about academic writing that you find so difficult? Put it into the chat for me, please. So is it getting started? Is it the content? Is it the length? What is it about academic writing that you find so difficult? So into the chat now, please, guys. We've got 60 of you here now, so we should have some good suggestions as to why it's so difficult. And we'll see if we can help you with those things. Knowing if I have enough to write about, Daniel, that's a really good one. And yes, you probably do have enough to write about. Yes, you definitely do have enough. How about imposter syndrome? Do you guys get that? Getting started. Yep, I'm going to tackle that one. I think that is one of the hardest things. Okay, so getting started, knowing if we've got enough to write about. the back and forwards with supervisor, to define the scope of what you want to tell, the difference in the abstract and the conclusion. Okay, so it's knowing what to write to maintain the flow. So it's about making sure you've got that good story. Okay, so there's lots of things. Knowing if I have searched the literature enough. Yeah, that can be a never-ending journey. You need to give yourself a timer cut off when you stop searching that literature. To struggle to make it interesting. To write, need to do a literature review. Not always, you know. I think that if you've been reading around the subject, I think that you honestly know a lot about it, know enough about it to at least start, and then you can pull on the literature to reinforce some of those points that you already know. I find it difficult to know how much I have to go deep into every explanation. One needs solid research work to support it, and it depends what you're writing about. So loads of different reasons there why you find it so difficult. Insecurity, anxiety about where to start, if you know whether you've gone deep enough, and all of that kind of things. Right, so getting started. I think this is often feels like the hardest bit. You know you've got to write, you know you've got a paper, you know you've got to write your PhD. So how do you get started? It just feels like a massive hurdle. But like all things, like if you're running a marathon, if you're starting a race, like in the picture here, it will get better if you train. So you wouldn't expect to be able to run a marathon without doing a bit of training first. And it's the same with writing. You don't expect to be able to sit down and write your PhD without training for it a little bit first. And I'm sorry, but like training for a marathon, I can't promise that it's going to be fun. You do have to go through the pain to get to the gain. So what I would say to you, first of all, that it is the hardest bit. The next step is to choose your weapons. So how do you like to write? Is it on your laptop? Do you prefer to write in pen and paper to start and then switch over to your laptop? How do you like to write on a tablet? So get yourself ready. Get your desk ready. Get your tools ready. If you like to write with jazzy coloured pens, get your pens ready. So for me, I start first in hand. So I sketch out some bullet points and then I'll switch over to working on the computer. I find that I think better if I write by hand, but again, totally personal choice. The other thing that I really need is headphones. So I find that I can work much better if I've got headphones in and block out the external world so that you can get that focus. And then choose your environment. So you need to be able to focus. So where is the best place for you to do this? If you're in a big open office, you might need to get some of those headphones to block out the rest of the world. Put your headphones on, put up a do not disturb sign. You might need to test out a few different spots to find where is the best place. Where do you like to work the best? So who has a favourite spot to do their writing? Put them into the chat. Can you work in a coffee shop, for example? Now we're allowed again. So for me, I can write. I find that I can write anywhere. It's just that I have to be zoned in. So I have to have my headphones on. I have to be able to block out what is going on around me. So that leads on to my next thing. The thing you need to do to get started is to really get rid of distractions. So on our computers, on our phones, there's always these distractions. So if you're on your laptop, switch off your email, turn off all the notifications, set your Teams to do not disturb, shut down your internet windows, just shut down everything. Because as soon as you get distracted, it can take up to 20 minutes to refocus. So if you're in writing mode, suddenly you get a WhatsApp and you're like, oh, and it's one of your friends and you're like, oh, okay, I'll message them. And then to come back to your work, it can take you up to 20 minutes to get back into it again. So when you're going for your focused writing session, turn off your email, turn off all those notifications, place a do not disturb sign on your door or on your head or on your back, or so that people know that they need to leave you alone for that period of time. And during this time, your phone is your worst enemy. These guys are your worst enemy. And if, like me, you get really anxious if this isn't nearby, then this can be really hard. But it is one of the most distracting things. So if you don't have separation anxiety like I do, put your phone in another room, in a drawer, turn it off, turn it on silent, not vibrate, because you can still hear it. Put it somewhere else. But if you need to have the comfort of your phone there, or if you have Spotify attached to your headphones like I do, another reason why I have my phone nearby, then I've got an app on my phone that called Forest, and there are loads of these types of apps out there that you can use, that once you've got them, for a set period of time, you can't do anything else on your phone. So this one, Forest, you grow some plants, which is appropriate for a biomass and bioenergy researcher. So if I mess with my phone, my plant dies. And then it also helps because you can see how long you've been focused for over the time period, so over the week, over the month, and so on. And you can really see your progress in your focus time. So your phone is your enemy, so we need to find ways to defeat it. So when should I write? Most of us don't really have big blocks of time in our diaries. And if they do have big blocks of time, then they normally get filled up with other tasks. Emails will come in. There'll be all sorts of little jobs that you can go and do. You can go into the lab and sort some stuff out. And if there is no deadline, you definitely won't do it. So when should you write? For most people, the best time to write is first thing. So the first thing you do when you come to your desk is to write. And that means no other thing first. So don't check your emails first. Don't look at your calendar first. Don't look at all the other stuff that's going on first. You do writing first. No one's going to die if you don't answer your emails for another hour or so. So it takes a bit of getting used to not to check your emails first thing, but honestly, nothing bad happens. So if you can, schedule it for first thing in the morning. But you might not be a morning person. So for most people, it's first thing, because if you leave it till later on, you've got all of those other things that have gone on during the day, and they just sort of linger over you, and you realise that you need to do them by the end of the day. If you do it at the start, you don't have those. The other thing I'd say is that you should schedule it into your diary. Make sure that it is precious. Make sure that it's in the diary. You don't let anyone book other meetings around it. And I recommend that you do it little and often. So this is one of the big concepts that I'm going to teach you today. And it's about those little and often times for that deep work. And that can be from 45 minutes to 2 hours, and let that be regularly. So every other day, for example. So in my diary, I've got an hour of writing time every other day. And then every 2 weeks, I have a 2-hour block. And that's what works for me. After that time, I lose focus. So 2 hours is about the maximum length that I can write, and is about the maximum time that most people can write. So don't let anything else invade that time. Make it a routine. It's like your training routine to getting that marathon paper out the door. And that also helps with the guilt of not writing as well. If it's in your diary and you know that you've sat there for that time, you know that you've done something. So it helps alleviate that feeling as well. So with that kind of training, you will get better. And one of the important things that I have learned is that there are so many reasons to put it off. So it could be, oh yeah, I'm not really in the mood for writing today. Oh, I'll do it tomorrow, maybe. And you know that never happens. You might think, oh, I need to do some more experiments. Oh, I need to read some more of the things. I need to know more about the research. Oh, look, there's a new episode of my favorite show on Netflix. So there's so many reasons why you don't write, and you will never actually feel motivated. But what actually helps is if you actually do something. So this is one of the big lessons that I learned from Hugh, from his Turbocharge Your Writing, is that you won't get the motivation until you actually do something. And this actually does work. So even if you write for 5 minutes, then you'll get motivated to write more. But if you don't actually start, you'll never get that motivation. So yeah, just do it. just get on with it. And that's why having it in your diary is really important, because then you can't duck out of it. So snack writing or deep work. I recommend that you go for 45 minutes as a minimum, up to a maximum of 2 hours, and make it on a regular basis. And as I said, don't let anything else invade that time. Don't let anyone book meetings. Tell your supervisor that's your writing time. And so therefore they won't disturb it. So it's in my diary every other day for an hour, and I don't let anyone disturb that. Showing up for that is part of the training. So even when you don't feel like it, even if you don't feel like going out for that jog to train for that marathon, just by showing up, it's part of it. So even you have to sort of force yourself to sit there, even if you don't get a lot done, it's all part of the training. It will get easier over time. And writing things down really helps to clarify ideas and thoughts. So you won't know what you're going to say unless you get started. So some people say that they don't know where to start, but until you actually start scribbling down your thoughts and what you think the story might be, you won't actually know what's missing and what bits you need to work on a little bit more. So my golden rule for this, for these snack writing times, is that writing actually means writing. So it means nothing else. You can during that time, that precious time that you've put into your diary, the only thing you're going to do in that time is actually write. So writing is not editing and proofreading. So this isn't the time for you to go through and check your spelling and shuffle around the grammar. It isn't the time for you to do your reading or your researching. It's not the time for checking your emails. It's not the time for checking social media. So writing is only for writing. You're putting new words on paper. So that is the golden rule. This isn't the time for you to be reading. It isn't the time for you to be looking up, doing your literature surveys, finding all those new references. You're actually writing. So new words on paper. So tell me, what have you been putting off writing? Snacks. There's a knack to snacks. So what has everyone been putting off? So I'll tell you mine. I'm on a grant writing program as part of the university are putting on, and I've got to write a grant proposal by the end of July. I've been putting it off. So is it a part of your PhD you've been putting off? Is it a particular paper that you've been putting off? Tell me, what have you been putting off? So there's an article paper for your PhD project. Okay, find it difficult to focus. Super important press release. That sounds exciting. Do I have to go to this conference, Dan? Journal paper from a few years ago. And yeah, that's a difficult one. If you've left it for a long time and you've kind of forgotten what was there, then picking up those things is quite difficult. Dan says it will be exciting, and yes, you're invited. Yes, I hope I don't have to do more work at this conference, Dan. Hi, Luned. My challenge: conducting academic research while trying to meet requirement demands of stakeholders and all those other people, little and often. And snack writing sounds very good advice. Yeah, I'm glad you like it. Yeah, it's something that worked for me because my diary was always getting filled up. Literature review, need to be updating this. So yeah, everyone's got something that they've been putting off. We've all got those ghost papers that are just sitting in our drawer that we've been ignoring for years. Okay, so Patricia's got loads of different things at the same time, and that is a struggle. Hopping between topics, even though I know Patricia's very good at it, it is quite hard to then suddenly focus on that particular thing. So lots of people have been putting off writing. So as I said, start really small. If you don't know where to start really small. So for example, if I take the right, so let me look at one of these examples. So super article paper. So what you can do first is write the first paragraph of that introduction. So what is the first thing that you want people to read? So don't go too big with your ambition. Start really small. Don't say, okay, I'm going to write the whole results section for this paper. Maybe start with, okay, I'm going to look at this small amount of results and write about that section first. It could even be just a paragraph, but it all counts. So pick something and commit to it. And that is one of the key things as well. And when you're ready, the other thing, this is going to make you feel really uncomfortable. But when you do start writing, write crap. So it will be bad, but no one needs to see it. Don't correct it as you go. Just dump out all your thoughts. If there is a bit that needs a reference, don't stop and go hunting for it, because that takes your focus off. Just write reference next to it or highlight it so that you know you need to look up for a reference later. You've probably already done a lot of reading around your topic. So you probably know all the points, but you just might need to go and find that reference. But don't do it then, do it later. Don't spend time checking spelling, just write it down. So you literally writing down with your pen or typing on the screen. Don't worry about the spelling, you're just getting your thoughts out. And as you're writing, you're actually thinking about what's going to come next. So this is really good practice, and it does take a bit of getting used to, but you will surprise yourself at how many words come out when you just start writing about it. You might think, oh, I don't really know about this, but actually you know a lot, and all of this will come spilling out. So you might not be what the final version will look like, but all papers, they go through so many cycles, so many changes, that the first one will never be the one that gets published anyway. So it really doesn't matter. So the science bit, we've done a lot of chatting about getting in the position, you're at your desk, you're ready to go. So now for the science bit, what should I write in my article? So the thing that you want to do is you want to tell a story. The best papers, and someone's already written this, that the best papers always have a strong narrative or a strong story. If the story isn't there, or it's not clear as the reader is writing it, then like a bad film, you'll lose interest, you'll switch off. So you can apply that same theory to writing, whether it's your PhD or your journal article or your press release. It needs to have that story. So what is your story? And this is a good starting framework for your work. So here are some of the prompts that I use if I'm trying to, whatever I'm writing, normally scientific wise. So what are you trying to do? You can actually use these as writing prompts, or as that first thing that you do when you sit down to do your writing session. So what are you trying to do for that paper, for example? So why do you want to do that? So what's the background? Why is there a gap in the research? Is there an interesting result that you found that you want to find further? So you can put down bullet points for these. What did you do? What did you observe? What did you conclude? And how does that inform future work? And if you look at any piece of scientific writing, it normally boils down to this. So what you're trying to do, why, what you did, what you saw, what you concluded, and what does that actually mean? If you look at the sections that are in the journal guides for authors, or if you look at the sections in any typical report, they normally follow this kind of structure. So this is a really good starting point if you're stuck as to where to start. So this is where I start. I'll start putting down some bullet points for each of these things. So you've chosen your journal. I won't go into that process. Loads of publishers have web tools that can help you find the best journal as well. Patricia mentioned some of the other ways that you can choose your journals. Another good resource is the people around you. So speak to your supervisor, speak to your Patricia. So I work with Patricia, so I've got Patricia's advice. So talk to people, find out which one fits best with you. And then go to their website and look at that journal guide for authors. And this will give you an idea about whether your topic is relevant as well, whether this is the right fit for you. And as Patricia has already mentioned, all of the journals will have a guide for authors. And this will tell you about the specifics of that journal. So be aware that each journal is different. So they might have different requirements for all sorts of things like line spacing, fonts, and all of this kind of stuff. So you need to be prepared and get all that information ready. So it can be whether when you submit it, it's double spaced, font sizing, all of that kind of stuff. So this is what I'm about to show you now is a very general guide for a typical standard journal article. This isn't for a review article. Review articles are normally much longer than this, but it gives you sort of a feel for the kind of lengths that you'd want to write for each of the sections. So your title, make it short and make it informative. We've all seen them, the titles that go on for about a paragraph that no one could ever say in one breath. So keep it short, keep it informative, make it interesting, grab that reader's attention if you can. The abstract is normally one paragraph, can be around 250 words, normally from 250 to 500 words. Again, that really depends on the journal. The introduction, so this is where you set all of that background and context for your work. So the short sort of literature review of what's already been done, why you're doing it. So this is the what and why, what you're doing and why you're doing it. So that's normally 1.5 to 2 pages long. Use these as starting points for if you don't know how long your paper is going to be, you can just use these to give you a kind of feel. The methods now. So this is the what you did part of the section. So you've done the what and why, and now what you did. So what did you actually do? Talk about your experiments, talk about your models, talk about how you actually did it. Then you get the results, which is the biggest section. So 6 to 8 pages normally. Remember, this is double spaced. So when you actually break that down, it isn't actually a lot. It's actually less intimidating than you actually think. So the results then is what you found. So this is the most important part of your story. So think about how you can show this in a really engaging way. Think about really nice figures and diagrams. And the next section is the discussion. So what does that actually mean? You've got all of these results. What does that mean for your field of research? So what does it mean? Are your costs higher? Is that catalyst a lot better than the other ones that you've mentioned in the previous literature? Have you filled this research gap? Have you made an amazing discovery and solved climate change? And then the conclusion is, so what? So you've done all this work, you've made this amazing discovery, so what? What happens next? And that is normally really, really short. That's the one thing that surprises me about journal papers is how short the conclusion is. Normally just a tiny few words. But when you ever look at a paper, well, I do anyway, I normally read the abstract, and then I read the conclusion, and then if it sounds decent, and then I'll go and dive in and read the rest of it. So you can see how important those 2 short pieces of writing are. So getting those to be really punchy, getting all the impact into those bits is really important. Then there's all the other bits that go to support it. So your figures and your tables. So making sure you've got really nice figures that you can read. Everything's labelled nicely. You don't want to overdo it as well, so there's got to be a nice balance. And then your references, of course. So that's typically what is included within a journal article. I'll just see whether I've got any questions at the moment. No, nothing so far. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an idea about the sort of size you should be aiming for when you're going for it. My other tip as well is when you're writing, keep your writing really simple. You don't need to have loads and loads of extra words. So don't be this guy. When you're writing an academic paper, it doesn't have to have loads and loads of fancy words. So don't feel the need to put in loads of extra words, extra describing words. We're all scientists. We don't need all these extra words. So keep the language simple. If I'm ever reviewing, they are the first thing to go. I'll just chop them because they're just not required. So don't be that person. Keep it nice and simple. You don't have to make it really flowery. The other thing I'd say is to keep track of your progress. So knowing now the kind of size of your paper, keeping track of your progress is really helpful. And it helps you because you can see, oh, I am actually making progress, even if it's only a small amount of progress. I've done a little bit more on this section. So if you decided for your writing session to focus on the literature review, you can see those numbers going up for the words written. So this is one of the resources that is available online from Hugh. So you can go and find that, or you can make your own. I made my own version of this because I like to do a jazzy graph so that I can see the number of words going up. But whatever works for you, that really helps motivate me. If I can see that I'm making progress, then that is really positive for me mentally. Daniel, no, you don't get bonus points for saying thus. Right, so what do you do at the end of your writing session? I think it's also a really important thing. You can't, if you just leave it and then you're not going to touch it for another couple of days, or like some of us, that can stretch out to a longer time if we do keep putting off our writing. So it is important that we think about what we do at the end of our writing session. So not knowing where to start the next time you sit in front of your piece of paper or in front of your screen is one of the things that slows down our progress or makes it harder to get started. So what I would say to you is write yourself some notes. So write some notes to self, leave yourself some notes about where to start next. So this can be in the form of bullet points. So you can say, okay, I've got here, what's the next thing I need to do? So leave yourself a little notes. Where did you get to? What's the next thing? So what's the next section you want to work on? What's the next point that you need to make? Some people even leave an unfinished sentence so that when they come back, the first thing that they've got to do is finish off that sentence. And it just means that you'll get started faster because you can quickly scan and you're like, oh, right, okay. And then you can carry on. You don't need to go back and read all of that stuff that you've already done. So this one as well is a really good one to get you started a little bit faster next time. This doesn't just work for writing. This works for everything I've found when you're working on lots of different projects as well. Leaving yourself a note of where you've got to and what happens next is really helpful, because otherwise I'll just forget. So something that quite a few people have mentioned is about that feeling of anxiety, about that feeling of self-doubt when you send your paper off and then the review comes back and you think that everything, and it's covered in red pen, it's covered in those track changes, and you think what you have written is rubbish. So 90% of us feel like that, so you are not alone. But all the evidence points to the fact that you're not rubbish. You all have degrees, some of you have PhDs, you are all good enough to be doing this job. So when you're feeling like that, just remind yourself of all the stuff that you have done. You have written big pieces of work before, so you know you can do it. And the more that you expose yourself to the things that make you uncomfortable, the lower your anxiety will become about it. So you have to swallow your pride a little bit and send it out there. And the sooner that you share your work and send it out to your co-authors or your supervisor, the better your piece of work will be, because it just gets better the more people are involved with it and the more time you've got to revise and revisit it. So don't worry about it being crap. This is another hard one to swallow. Get the feedback. It really does hurt, but it really does help. So try and view it as free advice. So imposter syndrome, this is really common amongst academics. Yeah, like I said, 90% of us have it. 90% of us think, I'm not very good at this, or what I've written is rubbish, or someone's going to find out I have no idea what I'm doing. But we all feel like that. I feel like I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm just making it up. So just talk to your supervisor, talk to the other early career researchers about it. So some of the things that might help you with your writing and getting over those issues of the anxiety, the imposter syndrome, is one of the big ones is working with others. So buddy up when you're writing a paper. The other thing I'd say is that looking at some work I've done recently as part of my other job about research outputs, those papers that have got more than one author are the ones that are more highly cited. So definitely work with others. Work with people that you like working with as well. That also helps. And those that, so that you can support each other. That makes a really big difference. Join a writing club or set one up. So there's one at Aston. So that's every 2 weeks. There's a 2-hour writing session. We can set one up for share if you'd like. If you'd like a share writing club, then let us know and we can set that up for you. So it's just like a meeting in your diary. You don't speak, you don't have your camera on, but it just means that you're protected. No other meetings are going to take over that time. And then if you want someone to read something, you can just type it in the chat. So if you want a share writing club, maybe the Santosh Daniel, let's see if anyone's interested in that. We can get that set up for you. So Leeds already has Shut Up and Write. Yeah, Aston has Write Club. Yeah, don't take the feedback personally. This one's really hard. This one's really hard to do. But it is hard. It does hurt when your work comes back and it's covered in pen. But it is about making it better, and you will get better at it. It's all part of that training process. Aston's Write Club sounds more elegant. Well, I took the name off Fight Club, so is that elegant? The first rule of Write Club is not to talk about Fight Club. If you've not seen Fight Club, that won't make any sense. Okay, right. So other things, prioritized. So which paper are you going to write first? Normally there are loads of different things that we could be writing. So like Patricia mentioned, she's got a paper, there's a grant, you've got some old ones, you've got some new ones. So write yourself a list of which ones you want to get done first, and stick to it. Stick to that list until you finish it, and then break it down into those small snack writing sections. Reviewer, Patricia mentioned this as well. Your writing actually improves if you read other people's writing, so you can pick up all sorts of nice tips and tricks. As academics and as researchers, basically we're massive magpies, so we're just picking out all these different bits from all over the place. So by becoming a reviewer, there's a number of benefits. First of all, you've got a really good idea of what's going on in your research field, so that helps you with your literature reviewing and having a general awareness of the scope of your research. Also helps with your writing, helps you with identifying what's good, what's bad. Some other things I'd say is use the tools that are available to you. So to help fix those easy things like grammar and punctuation, there are loads of online tools you can use to do that for you automatically. So I use Grammarly. That one's really good, and it can help you with making your writing more concise, because you can set it to different types of writing. So use tools like that. And then finally, reward yourself. It's really hard to do this. So when you've finished your 45 minutes or your 2 hours, get yourself a biscuit, have a special dance. For me, it'll be a cup of tea. Sometimes it might be a nap if I've done some writing in the afternoon. And when you submit that paper, and get it out there and it's accepted, celebrate it, really reward yourself. It's something we don't do enough. We work really hard, but we don't show off about it enough. So reward yourself, tell your mates, tell your mum and dad, reward yourself, buy yourself a cake. I'd do that as well. So hopefully you've picked up some useful things. I'm just going to summarize now the 3 main things. The first one is that most good writing starts as bad writing. So don't be afraid of just scribbling stuff down. No one's ever going to look at it. You're just getting your thoughts out. So just write. Then the second one is about scheduled snack writing or deep work, whatever you want to call it. I call it snack writing normally because at the end of it I do have a snack. 45 minutes to 2 hours regularly. Find out what time works for you and put that into your diary. regularly. And remember that showing up to these sessions is part of the training. Remember the golden rule that writing means writing. It doesn't mean all of that other nonsense. It doesn't mean looking at Twitter. Twitter's my downfall. Hide your phone, get rid of all of those distractions. Writing means writing, new words on paper. So those are my top things that I've learnt over the course of my academic career to help me get over my hatred for academic writing. So I hope that's been useful for you guys. So what one thing